Picking leftovers and bottles from a trash can, Jack noticed a group of young people. They were standing a little further away and were discussing something animatedly. The woman in a beautiful wedding dress was gesturing wildly with her hands, and next to her stood an equally attractive young man in an expensive suit. Wedding. Those are some lucky people, Jack had said to himself, tilting his head to the side. The homeless man continued his search, while an obsessive thought kept swirling in his head. Just remember. Sometimes images would surface in Jack's mind, but they never turned into clear memories. They were more like reflections in the water covered with ripples. The man ended up on the street by an unfortunate accident, or rather his life changed so abruptly that now it was unclear where he came from and who he even was. The man was like a ghost among people. Jack has had to survive wandering the streets for several years now. By the way, it was his street friends who came up with the name Jack for him when he first got to the shelter. He used to work at a construction site once, and then he was thrown out of there without getting paid a cent. They even took his documents and threatened that if he went to the police, he would only get himself into more trouble. Everything that happened next was some kind of a fog. He remembered being offered a drink by some people and accepting it, and then he woke up in a hospital. An elderly doctor bent over the patient and said, "You were poisoned. The dose was almost lethal, but you got lucky. However, unfortunately, you still have got some serious complications. Your gastrointestinal tract is damaged, your eyesight and hearing are affected, and partial amnesia is also possible. I don't know if your memory will ever return, but if you continue to drink alcohol, the chance of that happening would be slim to none." Endless IVs, shots, and pills put Jack back on his feet, but his memory never returned. It seemed to the man that he used to have a family once. However, he couldn't remember anything specific, like the name of his wife or whether he had children. Thus, Jack had no choice but to get used to living under a false name, without any recollection of his former life. He became a man without a past, and thus without a future too. His whole life narrowed down to very basic needs: to find something edible and survive. Having finished his daily round of the trash cans, the homeless man looked at the young people once again and wandered off to the recycling point. He had to get there before closing to get his money for his recyclables, which he would then spend on some very basic food. All it was ever enough for was some bread and maybe some cheese, although he did manage to buy canned fish once in a while, which was a true feast for the man. Having gone down to the shelter, Jack immediately reported to the leader of the homeless, "Here, Nicholas, that's all I got today. I grabbed a couple loaves of bread, too." "Well done. Go take a rest. Monica's cooking soup, so we'll eat soon," Nicholas said, looking at the contents of the bag Jack brought and a couple of bills in his hands. Nodding in response, Jack went up to Monica and quietly handed her a couple of chocolates. "This is for you. I saved up some money and wanted to get you a treat." "Thank you, honey. You are so sweet. What would I do without you?" The woman smiled and ran her hand through Jack's thick hair. Monica was cooking dinner over an open fire, and some of the smoke went into a makeshift chimney, but most of it just filled the room, making everyone there look like they were performing some sort of ritual. But the homeless people were used to it, because warm smoke was still better than cold air. Monica poured the soup into cups for herself and for her friend and sat down next to Jack. "Why are you so sad? Is it because you didn't get enough money?" "No, I saw a couple of happy newlyweds today and it made me feel sorry for myself. After all, our life is like a bog. If you get into this point, it will suck you in and there's no getting out. Have some soup, Jack. You're probably hungry and it makes you worry too much. Forget about it all. You are where you are, and they are where they are. Just live your life however you can. Maybe you'll remember your past at some point, but what will that give you? You knew perfectly well there's no going back," the woman responded, and the man just shrugged. "I don't know. I'd like to remember at least some of it, and then the rest will fall into place. The scar's hurting again, so the weather is probably going to change for worse." Jack frowned slightly, putting his hand on his cheek. The newlyweds greeted their guests and then headed for the promenade. Since the weather was nice after the photo shoot, the groom suggested going to see his parents. "I'll just drop by for a minute. I need to remind them of something." "Tell me you're not still mad at them." Averting her gaze to the side, Anna replied with restraint, No, darling, it's water under the bridge. It's just that the way they reacted to your decision simply shocked me. I know that your parents are against our marriage." Philip asked the driver to stop near the restaurant. "Okay, let's have a drink first. To be honest, I don't understand my family either, but you know that they are, well, rather opinionated, and I hope everything goes smoothly today. I'm so tired of all the wedding planning. I thought I'd go crazy, but it looks like I managed to keep my sanity, and now we can finally get our marriage license." "I'm so proud of you, my love," Anna smiled. And that was despite the fact that her relationship with her fiancé's parents was very tense. Mrs. Bornstein, Philip's mother, didn't approve of her son's choice, and she didn't hold herself back expressing her disapproval disregarding Anna's presence. "Oh, son, such marriages are never happy. You need to choose a woman of your social standing." And Philip's father shared his wife's opinion, and even said that he wouldn't attend their wedding. However, Philip managed to change his parents' mind about that. After having a cocktail each, the newlyweds went to the groom's parents. They arrived 20 minutes later, and while Anna was still sitting in the living room and trying to remain calm, Philip was talking quietly to his mother in the kitchen. "Oh, we'll be fine, son. Your father and I have prepared a gift for you. I'm sure you'll remember it the rest of your lives, and you don't have to thank us. It's from the bottom of our hearts, and it will definitely help set the mood," Mrs. Bornstein said, looking in the direction of her daughter-in-law. Philip didn't ask what it was. He didn't mind getting surprised. The tension subsided a little when the groom's mother asked her daughter-in-law for a private conversation in the kitchen. Anna was wary, but she pulled herself together and prepared for the talk. "As you can see, we aren't poor, and Philip is our only son, so we want him to have a happy family and a strong marriage." The mother-in-law began the conversation. The poor woman thought that she would now get reproached again, but this time Mrs. Bornstein continued rather kindly. "We have decided not to interfere with your family union anymore. I won't hide the fact that we didn't like you at first. We were worried that you only cared about Philip's money, but we've come to realize that you're a good person, so don't worry, we won't interfere with the wedding. Moreover, we've decided to invite an excellent musician to perform at the party. You'll like him." The newlyweds got into their car again and went to get ready for the celebration. Looking after them, Mrs. Bornstein called her husband over and whispered something in his ear. Judging by the expression on the husband's face, he was truly amazed. Apparently he didn't agree with his wife's plan, but he didn't dare to contradict her. After dinner, Jack decided to take a short nap, but suddenly someone pushed him to the side. "Hey buddy, looks like you got a side job," his friend whispered. "They're looking for a musician. You said that you could sing. Maybe you can make some money?" Lord, who would be looking for a homeless musician, the man thought. But he did go out of the shelter. Before him stood a couple of well-dressed, intelligent people. "So, you need a singer? Aren't there other artists you could hire? Why turn to the homeless people?" Jack asked rather rudely. The well-dressed couple were Philip's parents, and that was the gift they decided to give the newlyweds. After all, they did promise to pay for a musician, which is exactly what they're about to do. Realizing that she needed to take matters into her own hands, Mrs. Bornstein took out several bills from her purse. "I hope this money is enough to convince you that we are extremely serious." Looking at the banknotes, Jack perked up noticeably, although he understood that something was clearly off in that situation. Nevertheless, the money the woman was holding was a powerful argument, so the man thought that it would be foolish to turn her down. The taxi arrived a few minutes later when Philip's parents had already left in their car. They were eager to see the reaction of their son and his fiancée.
That's it. We are here. This seems to be the address I was told to take you to."
The taxi driver slowed down near the location where the wedding ceremony was held.
"I don't know what you did, but they paid a lot for this trip. They even told me to come back for you in an hour. Well, good luck to you. I hope they at least feed you in there, since it's unclear what else is going on here."
Mrs. Bornstein was already waiting for Jack at the entrance to the restaurant. "Let's go. The guests are already waiting. We told them that you'd play the guitar, a live performance, so to speak." When the man stepped onto the stage, the guests were stunned to see a clearly homeless musician in front of them. Disgruntled whistles were heard from all around the room, but then, without even understanding how it happened, Jack ran his fingers over the strings like a great musician and started singing. The room froze. There was absolute silence. Only Jack's voice performing a magnificent song was heard. The man didn't understand how he knew the words. They simply just came out of his subconscious, and along with the words, clear images came rushing in. A flowering garden, a dark-haired woman with a little girl in her arms. She's laughing, waving her hand at him and saying something, but he cannot make out the words. And after the last chord, there was a couple of seconds of complete silence before the guests burst into thunderous applause. Jack's performance was a sensation. No one could have even imagined that a homeless person could have such talent. Jack suddenly grabbed his face and began to rub his scar. It started aching once again. Then Anna ran out from the crowd of guests and jumped on stage screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" as she threw herself on the stranger's neck. The homeless man hugged her, his daughter, and something clicked in his head. Now he could clearly see the image of his family. He'd been waiting for this moment for so long. Anna looked intently into the eyes of the homeless man and said, "I always knew that I'd see you again, Daddy, and it's too bad that Mom didn't live long enough to see it happen. If it weren't for that scar under your right eye, I wouldn't have recognized you." Jack learned from his daughter that his wife, whose name was Leah, had died in an accident. But she never stopped believing that her husband Patrick would come back home one day. Unfortunately, it had been 7 years since he disappeared, and many of the relatives completely lost faith that they would ever see him again. Putting the guitar aside, no longer Jack, but Patrick, took his daughter's face in his warm hands and said, "Thank you, baby girl, for not giving up hope of seeing me again. I got in trouble and lost my memory for a long time. All these years, I was trying to remember who I was and where I came from." "Is this your present? Who did you want to humiliate, me, Anna, or Patrick?" Philip shouted at his parents. "As you can see, nothing worked out for you. Your cruel plan turned into good, and now all you have to do is apologize to all of us." At that point, the groom's parents had nothing left to do but admit their mistake and ask the newlyweds for forgiveness. The wedding celebration continued despite the misunderstanding, and the guests even asked Patrick to sing a few more songs. Soon, Anna took her father to her mother's grave. The gray-haired man looked at the carved inscription and couldn't hold back his tears. There was no turning back time, and nothing could bring his family back. But Patrick was grateful for what he had nonetheless. He managed to find out who he was and find his daughter, and that made him the happiest man on earth. A few days later, the man put together full bags of food and went to visit his homeless friends. He told them what happened to him, and he left the shelter forever. The homeless people discussed Jack's story for a very long time, and everyone hoped that one day each of them would get their own miracle.